Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our CAP webinar series. This session is going to be about DRS employment or VR services. We're going to try and provide an overview of the services offered and a little bit of an explanation of what you can expect after contacting and making a referral to this agency. So my colleagues Sarah, Emily, and I are really thrilled to be with you this afternoon. And we're trying to save some time at the end of the presentation for questions. So if you think of anything as we're going through the presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. And if you would prefer at the end of the presentation to voice your question aloud, we will be able to take you off mute and do that as well. So let's get started. So first, we wanted to provide an overview of Equip for Equality. Many of you on the call today may be familiar with our agency, but for those of you that aren't, Equip for Equality is what's called the Protection and Advocacy System, or the P&A organization for the state of Illinois. And every state and US territory has an organization like Equip for Equality. And so our mission is to advance the human and civil rights of people with disabilities here in Illinois. And we do that by providing free legal services about issues that are related to an individual's disability. And we're kind of organized into three main teams or departments here at Equip for Equality. So the first of which is the civil rights team, which Sarah and I are both on. And on the civil rights team, we do a whole lot of legal work, anything from employment work to community integration. So helping people with disabilities remain in the community and avoid living in institutions. We also do some guardianship defense work, some housing discrimination, service animals. So you can see a lot of work goes on within the civil rights team. Next, we have the special education clinic, and Emily is one of the attorneys on that team. So the special education clinic provides students with disabilities and their families support so that the students can receive the appropriate services and supports that they're entitled to under the law. And last but not least, we have the independent monitoring unit. And that team conducts abuse and neglect investigations, and they're actually able to go inside facilities and places where people with disabilities live and make sure that their rights are being protected. And so we have the authority to go into those settings, review records, and talk with people directly. This is a really unique access authority that's given to organizations like ours. So at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the contact information. This is the general contact information for Equip for Equality's offices. And I should say, we represent individuals throughout the state of Illinois. So even though most of us are working remotely and based here in Chicago, we can serve individuals throughout the entire state. And I'm just going to provide a brief overview right now of the Client Assistance Program, or CAP, C-A-P. And CAP has been established by the Rehabilitation Act. And the Rehabilitation Act is one of the big federal laws that's relevant to our disability law world here. And generally, what the Client Assistance Program does is it serves individuals who are either applying for or actually receiving services that are funded through the Rehabilitation Act. And so what are those services? Well, those services are vocational rehab services, which we'll talk more about later on in this presentation. And there are also services, independent living services, that are provided by the Network of Centers for Independent Living, or CILS, here in Illinois. And you'll note that CAP provides assistance to a wide variety of ages. So this includes high school and transition age students. And kind of a lesser known aspect about the Client Assistance Program is that it can assist individuals by advising them and informing them about their rights under Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And for those who aren't familiar, Title I of the ADA is all about employment. So it fits in nicely with the Rehabilitation Act services and the vocational program, that connection with employment. And the Client Assistance Program exists to really focus on groups of individuals who have been unserved or underserved by vocational rehabilitation services. So we're always looking for individual and systemic work to look at those groups that have been traditionally unserved or underserved and make sure that they still have the same access to vocational services. So across the country, many CAP programs are housed outside of state government. And many of them are actually housed within the protection and advocacy organizations. So they're inside our sister agencies, so the agencies that are like Equip for Equality. But here in Illinois, up until about a year ago, the Client Assistance Program was actually housed within DRS, within state government. So if someone was receiving vocational services through DRS and they had an issue or something they wanted to complain about, they had to reach out to the Client Assistance Program, which was also within state government. So as of a little over a year ago, the CAP program was redesignated from within DRS, and it has been officially redesignated to Equip for Equality. So the Client Assistance Program is nothing new. It's just a new redesignation as an independent CAP program within Equip for Equality. And so we just briefly wanted to introduce ourselves today so that you can hopefully put some faces to names and voices in case you need to reach out to us in the future. So the first member of our CAP program is Rachel Weisberg, who is graciously providing some technical assistance to us behind the scenes and making sure that the webinar is going smoothly. So she is the director of the Client Assistance Program and the managing attorney of Equip for Equality. And I myself, my name is Megan Sorey, and I am a staff attorney here at Equip for Equality and a member of the Client Assistance Program. I've been with the organization for about 9 years now, and I've worked in a lot of different substantive areas. So I've assisted individuals obtaining home services, receiving other services through the Medicaid waiver programs. I've worked with some post-secondary education cases, and I'm really excited within the past year to focus more specifically on employment and vocational services through the Client Assistance Program, and really hoping to combine all of the experience that I've had with various populations in this role. So I want to briefly allow Sarah and Emily to introduce themselves. Sarah, do you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I am a staff attorney at Equip for Equality and a member of our CAP advocacy team. Like Megan, I've been on the CAP team for about a year now, and I'm really enjoying getting to do this kind of work. And before joining the CAP team, I focused on employment discrimination.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Emily?
Thanks, Megan. This is Emily Wilson. I'm also a CAP advocate and staff attorney here at Equip for Equality. I focus on supporting youth who are in transition and starting with DRS and also navigating the school piece as well. So I'm also a part of our special education clinic team that Megan talked about, and excited to be here with you all today.
Great, thank you to both of you. Let's go to the next slide. And let's just dive in right here and provide an overview first of the Division of Rehabilitation Services so that everyone will know what we're talking about when we're talking about vocational services that are available. So the Division of Rehabilitation Services is also known as DRS. So if you hear it both ways, we're referring to the same entity. And it is housed within the Illinois Department of Human Rights. And DRS actually administers 2 programs. So the Home Services Program exists for individuals who need assistance with activities of daily living in order to safely remain in the community. So, and the vocational rehabilitation program is what we'll talk about more today, and that is to assist individuals with achieving their employment goals. So for purposes of the client assistance program, we are only talking about folks who are eligible for or actually receiving vocational services through DRS. We want to note that Equip for Equality as an agency helps individuals who are applying for home services and receiving home services if they're having any issues. So feel free to contact that main number that was on an earlier slide. But the client assistance program is only working with vocational rehabilitation customers. And so the goal of the VR program is really geared towards employment. In its mission statement, the DRS vocational program is designed to help individuals secure, maintain, prepare for, and advance in employment. And it provides a wide range of services, which we'll talk about more later, but they span from anything of job coaching and counseling to providing assistance with post-secondary education or assistive technology, just to name a few. And I thought it would be helpful to just outline the criteria for individuals who are applying for or interested in thinking if they're eligible for VR services. So the eligibility criteria is actually relatively simple. So first and foremost, an individual to be eligible for DRS services must want to work. So employment needs to be a goal and something that they're interested in. Secondly, you need to have a physical or mental impairment that results in significant limitation. And thirdly, that disability must make it difficult for you to work. So you can see all the connection between the goal of wanting to work and your disability making it challenging to work and thereby needing DRS vocational services to aid with that process. And so the DRS eligibility criteria also makes clear that folks who are in high school or transitioning into the workforce, they are very much eligible to receive those DRS services. And Emily is going to talk more about that in her portion of the presentation. So there are a couple of different ways that you can connect to your local DRS office. So referrals can be made by phone. You can look up the local DRS office online. In your materials today, you'll have a hyperlink to a DHS office locator tool. So you can search by county, and then in some of the larger counties, like here in Cook County, you'll have to provide your zip code because there's many, many different DRS offices that serve our huge population here. Or you can submit an online referral form. This we kind of recommend if you're able to do so because it creates a paper trail and you're usually able to better identify, when did you make contact with that DRS office. But either way is fine. And again, the materials include a hyperlink to that online referral form. So whichever way you make that referral, whether it's by calling or emailing your online referral, you can expect to receive a response from your local DRS office within 30 days. And if for some reason it's been way longer than 30 days and you're still waiting to hear back, you can absolutely reach out to the client assistance program. We are able to reach out to the office supervisor and try and figure out what happened so that your referral wasn't lost and that we can expedite that intake process. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to really take us through what that initial intake assessment is going to look like with your DRS counselor.
Hi, everyone. So as Megan mentioned, after you've submitted a DRS referral, your case will be assigned to a counselor and somebody will reach out to you within 30 days to schedule an initial intake interview. And so at your intake interview, your DRS counselor will basically try to talk to you to get a sense of what your goals are, what what sort of employment you're looking for, what sort of assistance you're seeking, and basically just talk to you to figure out some ideas for where you can go from there. And they'll also ask you questions about your disability and how your disability impacts your daily life, including how it impacts your ability to find and maintain employment. And they might also at the intake interview ask you to provide documentation of your disability. They might have to send it after the interview, or you could bring it to your interview, whatever works for you. And they'll also talk with you about other elements that might be relevant, like your education, your work history, what skills you have, what your interests are, and any barriers to employment that you feel like you're facing. And they might start asking you to provide some documents. Especially depending on what type of services you're looking for and what sort of documentation they might need. They might ask for copies of your resume. They might ask for your transcripts, those sorts of things. And so after you've had your initial intake interview, and like we mentioned, DRS might ask you to provide certain documents, including documents like documentation of your disability. And so after you've had that interview and you've provided whatever documentation your counselor was looking for, DRS will notify you of whether you are eligible to receive services. And unless there are exceptional circumstances, DRS generally has about 60 days to notify you whether you're eligible. And if it has been longer than 60 days and you still haven't heard anything after meeting with a counselor, you can contact us. You can contact the Client Assistance Program, or CAP, and we can help you get information about the eligibility determination and what might be going on with your case. You also have a right to appeal a denial of eligibility. So if you meet with DRS and they come back to you and they say, we don't think you're eligible for services, you have a right to appeal that decision. And that's also something you can reach out to CAP about, and we can see if there's a way we can help you with that appeal. And so once you have been found eligible for services, the next step is for your counselor to draft an IPE. And so an IPE, or an individualized plan for employment, is a document that basically explains what your employment goal is. It'll list your employment goal at the top, and then what services DRS will provide to help you meet that goal. And so the IPE, there's a few requirements. It has to be written in the customer's native language or mode of communication. It has to be signed by both the counselor and the customer. And IPEs have to be reviewed at least every year, though they can be reviewed more frequently if necessary, like if something needs to be amended to add another service. And so your IPE is also the document that lists, all of the services that you'll be receiving and gives a few details about those. And so that is sort of what the IPE is. And like I mentioned, that comes after that eligibility determination. And your counselor might need you to provide some additional documents first before they can draft the IPE, but that'll basically be the document outlining what's going to happen in your case. And so we also wanted to go over a few examples of what services DRS can provide. And so services can include things like job training and job coaching. So, if you're starting a new job and you need some assistance adjusting to the workplace or learning to perform certain job tasks, that's something DRS can potentially help with. They can help with job placements. So they can help you with resumes, interview prep, applications. They can pay for supplies needed for employment. So if you need a certain license or you need certain tools, they might be able to provide those. They can also help with college or training programs. So if you are looking to go into a career that requires a degree, you can talk with DRS and they can potentially help with college tuition, with textbooks, with other college-related costs. DRS can also provide assistive technology to help somebody perform their job, like if you need a screen reader for a computer or something along those lines. DRS can help provide vocational evaluations. So maybe you meet with your counselor and you're not really sure exactly what your career goal is and you don't know what you necessarily want to go into. DRS can arrange a vocational evaluation to help get a sense of your skills and your interests and help you figure out ideas for what jobs might work. And then there's also a catch-all. DRS can provide other goods and services determined necessary for the individual with a disability to achieve an employment outcome. So if there's something that maybe isn't on that standard list we just went through, but is necessary specifically for you to reach your employment goal, then DRS can potentially provide that under that necessary catch-all. All right, and then I think go over to Emily to talk about transition.
Thanks, Sarah. This is Emily. Just wanted to highlight some of those DRS transition services in particular. So like Megan said, DRS vocational rehabilitation or VR services are available for youth when they're still in school or when they're transitioning out of school. One of the biggest things that we hear when we talk about these DRS transition services is they're often called pre-ETs, which stands for pre-employment transition services. So these are those services that are supposed to be there to help youth prepare, right, to enter the workforce and their community. So these are services designed for youth to be prepared and to move them towards greater independence. Right? And these are available for all students with a disability. So if your child or you as an individual on this call, if you do not have an IEP or a 504 plan, which are the plans for students with disabilities in school, but you have a diagnosed disability, you can still qualify for these services. And there's no requirement to be an existing DRS customer to access these services either, right? So being a part of these programs does not take the place of the eligibility process that Sarah talked about, right? So it's a separate process to be able to access these services, and then you would go through the eligibility process to become a customer, but you can access these pre-employment transition services before that. And these are often provided through partnerships with schools and local agencies. So a lot of times they're going to be provided at school. It's called the STEP program or the Fast Track program, or at your local Center for Independent Living. So thinking about helping DRS applicants and customers, what is our role as the Client Assistance Program as CAP? So we can provide information, advice, and advocacy for people who are applying for or receiving VR services. So that can look like a lot of different things. Some examples of cases that CAP can help with, right, is if a person wants to work and is looking for services to help, right? We can help with that initial process. If a person doesn't know how to submit a referral to DRS, like we've walked through today, there are a couple of different ways to do that, but we know sometimes that can be complicated and confusing, and we're happy to help with that process and make sure that it goes through. If a person is waiting for DRS to follow up on a referral, right? So if you've submitted a referral, but you've not heard from anybody and you want some help to make sure that that referral was processed, right? And your application moves forward, that's something that we can help with as well. And just a few more examples. So like Sarah mentioned, and if you're not found eligible for DRS services and you think that you should have been, that's something that we can help with. If you disagree with the goals that are in your individualized plan for employment in that IPE, we can help you with that as well. And then if you're having a disagreement between your counselor, between you and your counselor about the services that you need to meet your employment goal, right? We can help with facilitating that conversation or help you figure out what to do if you can't reach an agreement with your counselor. If there are communication problems, right? Sometimes we just struggle with communicating with certain individuals or with how everyone's communication styles are. If we need to help you navigate that process, we can do that too. And then ultimately, if DRS closes your file, right, and you do not want it to be closed or you want to reopen it, right, those are things that we can help with as well. And I'm going to turn it back over to Megan to talk about the ADA.
Great, thanks, Emily. This is Megan again. And if you recall at the beginning, when we were talking about the Client Assistance Program generally, we explained that it helps individuals who are applying for or receiving vocational rehabilitation services. And then we also touched upon kind of the lesser known aspect of the CAP program in that it can assist individuals by advising them about their rights under Title I of the ADA, that being the employment piece of the ADA. And this fits so nicely into Equip for Equality's work. We have been providing employment discrimination assistance and advice about employment as long as we've been an agency. So we're really pleased that we're able to do so through the CAP program. And it makes sense because a lot of individuals with DRS services have questions that may not be about how to strengthen the relationship with their DRS counselor, but might be more practical on the job questions. So through CAP, we are able to provide assistance by answering questions about topics like reasonable accommodations. We can talk about disability disclosure, a really tricky topic, kind of thinking about how to do it, when should you do it, particularly if you're someone who has not had a job before and you're wondering how to have that conversation with your employer about your disability as you're going through that interview process and then getting on the job. We can also assist individuals by challenging and dealing with really difficult discrimination cases and tricky employers. As we'll talk about a little bit further in the presentation, we've got some self-advocacy resources, and one of those are templates or sample letters that folks can use for requesting reasonable accommodations at work. We can also help individuals. We can even work with a DRS customer and a client, a DRS customer and their counselor together to draft and respond to reasonable accommodation requests with an employer. And like we mentioned before, we can just really help talk through and brainstorm really challenging situations where the employers are just not being accommodating or their questions about how the person should proceed. And I thought it'd be helpful at this stage, since we've talked a lot about the different ways that the client assistance program can help DRS customers, whether that is someone in a transition program or an adult DRS customer. But I thought it'd be helpful for us to just share what types of assistance, practically speaking, can the client assistance program provide. And so the CAP mandate is that we must try to resolve issues at the lowest level of intervention possible. And that really is consistent with our approach here at Equip for Equality. I think sometimes there's a misperception that lawyers' first step is to file a lawsuit whenever something is wrong or questionable, and that's really not how we operate for a number of different reasons. Here at Equip for Equality and through the Client Assistance Program, we help a lot of individuals through self-advocacy assistance, talking through what their rights are under the law and strategies and steps that they can take to advocate for themselves and move forward. And often that's really powerful and empowering, and sometimes leads to really great results with a lawyer kind of being behind the scenes. So at the lowest level, we can have these informal conversations with a DRS counselor. Now, of course, we have to get a signed release from the individual who's receiving DRS services. Otherwise, DRS can't speak with us. We could participate in a DRS informal resolution conference. And you'll notice as we're talking, the level of assistance is kind of elevating in terms of greater and direct intervention. We can participate in mediation with a neutral third-party mediator. Or we can even represent individuals all the way in an administrative hearing. If they need to appeal a decision made by DRS, and it goes all the way to an administrative appeal hearing, we can potentially represent a client in that setting. And we can also represent individuals in litigation in state or federal court. And I think it's really important that we have all of these different dispute resolution mechanisms available to make sure that clients' due process rights are protected and they're getting the services that they need. So of course, the level of assistance in an individual case varies depending upon the facts and our resources, but just wanted to provide an overview of what CAP assistance can look like. So now I think we're going to shift gears and really try to be practical about tips for successful advocacy and what that can look like. So I will turn this over to, I believe it is Sarah.
Yes, hi. So yeah, we want to go through a few tips about how to have a really successful experience working with DRS and obtaining services. And so, our first tip is just to communicate. And this is really key. It's really key to communicate your needs and your preferences to your counselor. Communicate with them about, if you know what your goals are, it's great to go in with that in mind. If you know what sort of services you're looking for, that's also great to go in with that in mind and to communicate that clearly. But it's also good to communicate even if you're not sure what you're looking for. Tell your counselor, I really want to find a job. I really want to get employment, but I'm not sure where I need to start. And just be open with them about what you're looking for and what you need. It's also a great idea to try to do some research and try to get information about what's available, how your counselor might be able to help you, what careers you might be interested in, so that you can make an informed decision about how you want to proceed with your services. And, that includes, feel free to ask questions. You can ask your counselor questions. You can call us and ask us questions. you know, you can do your own research, and you can also reach out and ask, and we can always help. And it's also an option to ask for disability-related accommodations if you need them for communicating with your counselor. So if you want to communicate, but you're having some trouble for some reason or another, and you think you would benefit from an accommodation, that's something you can ask for and something you can tell your counselor. It's also a good practice to try to prepare for meetings and phone calls in advance if you're going to meet with your counselor. So maybe write down what you want to discuss, an outline of sort of what things you want to go over. If there are any really important questions that you want to ask, you could write a list ahead of time and make sure that, you know, you're prepared to go through all of those questions with your counselor. So just as much preparation as you can have in advance of meeting with your counselor is a good practice. And I already sort of went over this, but another tip, ask questions if you don't understand any information. So if your counselor says something and you're not really clear on it, you can always ask. And if you're having any difficulty getting information from your counselor about that, like I said, you can reach out to us. And, you know, it's a good idea to try to be flexible. So, you know, sometimes people will reach out to DRS with a really specific service in mind, but, you know, that for some reason or another, maybe that service isn't available or it isn't possible. And so if that happens, you know, try to be flexible and think creatively. Talk with your counselor. Are there any alternatives? Are there any other options that would get me to the same result? It's also a good idea to look at your relationship with your counselor as a partnership and a collaboration. They're there to help you succeed. They're there to help you figure out what you need and how to best provide that to you. And so, you know, you guys are working together and both of you are working towards the same goal. It's also good to make sure you have a clear idea of next steps. So does your DRS counselor need a specific document from you or information about something? Do they need a response about something? Do they need to do something next? If you have a really clear sense of where you're going next in your case, that can help avoid any issues where maybe you fall out of communication or things get missed or lost. And so, you know, that's something that's really good to go over. If you're ending a phone call with your counselor, maybe take a moment or two to talk about, what are my next steps here? What are your next steps here? And you can also, if you don't have time to do that on a phone call, you can email afterwards. You can email your counselor and say, hey, here's my understanding of what the next steps were. What do you think? And so, you know, another important tip is to communicate with your DRS counselor if you're having any problems or any issues. If you're confused about something, or if a service you're being provided isn't working out, or, you know, you just think there are some issues with maybe the career goal you chose, you should communicate with your counselor about that. Let them know, keep them in the loop about what's going on, because that's how they can best help you to overcome that issue. You should also make sure that you are responding to calls or emails from your DRS counselor. So you should check your email regularly. You should check your phone regularly, maybe enter them into your contacts so that you know who's calling. And you should also make sure that you're scheduling regular meetings, or they should, you know, be scheduling these meetings with you. But if you feel like you've gone a while and you haven't heard from them, you can reach out and you can say, hey, I think I'd like to have a meeting to talk about my case or have a phone call. You should also make sure you're providing the documentation that they need. And we've particularly highlighted here documentation for college tuition cases. And the reason that we've highlighted that is that there can be some important deadlines for getting approval for those services. Generally, if you're trying to get tuition funding for a particular class or semester, you need to get that approval in a signed IPE before the first day of that class or semester. And so you really want to be on top of, if you're trying to get tuition funding, you want to be on top of providing any documentation that your counselor asks for, which might include a FAFSA, a class schedule, old transcripts, grades from previous courses. And, you know, another just general tip is to follow up with your counselor. So if you haven't heard from your counselor in a couple of weeks and you're waiting on, you know, approval for an important service, it is okay to just reach out and follow up and check in. In fact, it's a good idea to make sure that you're following up and to make sure that you know where things are at with your case. And I think now I'm going to turn it back over to Megan.
Sorry, I was muted. Great, thank you, everyone. So in order to engage effectively in that self-advocacy and really try and follow some of those tips that we've included in previous slides, we at the Client Assistance Program have developed a library of resources that we hope you'll find helpful as you engage in self-advocacy. And these materials are intended to be helpful for individuals who are either applying for or receiving DRS services. Also, we are hopeful that DRS counselors and still advocates will find them helpful in working with their clients and customers. So on Equip for Equality's CAP website, you will find about 10 or so fact sheets, sample letters, and worksheets. And this is an ever evolving, we continue to add to the library. So like I said, we have about 10 now, and I think at last count, we have about 20 or so in the works. So you can look for those on the website in the future, but they are available in PDF and Microsoft Word formats. And we're also working on getting them translated into Spanish and ASL videos. One thing that we are really proud of is our Client Assistance Program printed brochure that we've distributed. We worked with the Chicago Hearing Society to create ASL videos. And so we're planning to do the same for these fact sheets and worksheets. But we really want to be responsive to your needs and making sure that we are developing fact sheets and materials that are about topics that you have questions about or that you find helpful. So we are always welcoming feedback. If there's certain topics that you think would be helpful to have a fact sheet, or if there's a fact sheet that would be helpful to be translated into a particular language, please let us know, and we are happy to be responsive to those requests. We really want this library to be helpful and these resources to be useful to you. And in addition to these self-advocacy printed resources, the fact sheets and the worksheets, we also are doing the series of trainings. In fact, today's training is part of that series. We have been doing these for several months now. So you can actually go to our website, which is hyperlinked at the top of this slide, and you can find old archive training. So our first training was just introducing the Independent Client Assistance Program. And then we've done different substantive trainings about areas that are relevant to employment, as well as DRS vocational services. So you can go to our website and view the recorded sessions and also access any of the printed materials, the PowerPoints or other materials that went with those presentations. And again, we want to be receptive to feedback. If there are topics that you think a training would be more helpful than a fact sheet, please let us know. We are happy to receive that feedback. And now I think I'm turning it back over to Sarah.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk a little bit about when you might want to escalate your advocacy in the DRS VR system. So when, we've talked a lot about communicating with your counselor, but when do you maybe need to take a next step after just talking with your counselor about some issues you're experiencing? And so, you have a few different options, and also, when it might be appropriate sort of depends on what option you're potentially pursuing. And so, you can continue as an initial matter, if you start having some difficulties with your counselor, maybe, you're having an issue with agreeing on a certain service or just communicating in general, you can keep trying to work with your counselor. You can see if there's anyone else at your local office who you might be able to connect with to help communicate. So, you can keep trying to self-advocate. You can also, as I mentioned, ask to speak with your counselor supervisor. And you also have the option to file an appeal to challenge a decision made by DRS. And so that's that option where that is that's more of an escalation in terms of, you are moving forward with a formal appeal, and that appeal will go through the process. You'll have a chance for informal resolution, but it could also eventually progress to a hearing. And so filing an appeal is more appropriate in a situation where maybe you've been denied services altogether, maybe you've been denied a particular service, but you've been informed of a decision by DRS that you disagree with and that you would like to challenge. And that's more when filing an appeal is appropriate. And you generally have a 30-day deadline for filing an appeal after you've been informed of a particular decision. So if you ask for a service and DRS says we can't provide that service, you have about 30 days to file an appeal. So those are those situations where you've had a more where you've had a more significant like decision, an official decision, and you'd like to challenge that, that's when you might want to go beyond just talking with your counselor or maybe speaking with a supervisor, and you might want to move forward to appealing that decision. And so the other thing you can do in any of these situations is contact us. We can help, and you can contact us from the very beginning. You know, you don't have to wait until the situation escalates or there's been an official decision. If you feel like you're having some issues, you know, we don't necessarily need to jump in right away. If you're, you know, if you're worried like you don't want to cause any waves with your counselor, but you want some advice on communicating, that sort of thing, that's all things we can help with. So there is never a wrong time to contact us. We are always there to talk through the situation and talk with you about what your options are. And we can also help you figure out if you're not sure if you need to appeal, or if you're not sure when the deadline would be or things like that, we might be able to help with that as well. So, and we might be able to help if you file an appeal. So those are, you know, anytime is a good time to contact us. And, you know, since we like to give a little bit of employment discrimination advice under CAP as well, we also wanted to talk about when to escalate advocacy in employment situations. So, you know, if you're dealing with a situation at work where you're having some difficulties or you feel like you might be experiencing some discrimination, maybe you need an accommodation, you haven't been able to get one. You know, some good tips are to, first of all, you know, keep doing your job, keep doing your best, document what's happening, you know, keep notes, make sure that if you're having any written communications with your employer about what's happening, you should be keeping track of that and keeping those emails or those messages. You can try talking to HR, talking with a manager, you know, letting somebody know what's going on, especially if you're experiencing harassment or some kind of discrimination. You can try reaching out to HR and letting them know what's happening and seeing if they can help. You can also file a discrimination complaint, potentially, depending on the situation. If you feel that, you know, you've been denied an accommodation you need, or if you feel that you've been wrongfully terminated or that you're experiencing discrimination in the workplace, you know, you can file with the EEOC or the IDHR. You can also contact lawyers for assistance, and to that end, you can contact us again. You can contact CAP or Equip for Equality, and we can talk with you about your situation. We can help you brainstorm options. Maybe you're not really having a problem yet, but you're just not sure how to ask an accommodation or something for an accommodation or something like that. That's something we can potentially talk through with you and provide advice on. We can also potentially help you figure out what your options are if you think you need to escalate to filing with the EEOC or with the IDHR. And so, you know, you can reach out to us again at any stage when you're experiencing this, if you think you're having a disability related difficulty at work, and we can see what advice or assistance we can provide.
I think it's back to me. Thanks, Sarah. This is Emily. Just wanted to talk a little bit more about youth in transition in particular. So like we talked about before, there are those pre-employment transition services that youth can take advantage of through DRS, but youth can also go ahead and open up a case with DRS and start securing those vocational rehabilitation, those VR services. So wanted to highlight some things to think about when you're going through that process and some tips for working with DRS. So first things first, like I said, right, you can receive VR services while in school, right? The big thing to think about is that DRS is not going to duplicate services. So if there's something that you are getting from school or your child is getting from school, DRS is not going to provide the same thing, right? But if there's something that your child needs that they're not able to get from school, they can get it through DRS potentially. So the first thing is to talk with the school about connecting with DRS, right? So you can go through the typical referral process that we've talked about already, but some schools actually have established relationships with a DRS office and may even have a DRS counselor that is based out of their school or out of their school district. They may also do a little bit of a different assignment for DRS offices. So for example, if you've got a young person who's in Chicago public schools, they assign DRS offices based off of the location of the school and not necessarily the location where the student lives. This is so that because they have DRS counselors who come into the school buildings, so they're assigned that way. And there's a whole process, and we're happy to send more information about that if you've got a young person who is in CPS and is interested in these services, and get you connected with the office through CPS. I would also recommend that you provide an alternative contact information or contact on the referral. So it's going to include all of the information for the young person when they go through the referral process, but especially if the young person may not or maybe struggling with responding to emails or answering their phone, or that they don't have their voicemail box set up, right? And they might need some help with that. You can put an alternative contact on the referral form so that there's someone else that DRS is going to reach out to. And so kind of helps prevent it from getting closed prematurely, right? If there's just someone else to make sure that that young person knows someone reached out and kind of help facilitate that process. Would also say to help keep track of the timeline, right? To make sure that you're not missing communication and it doesn't fall through the cracks, right? Again, it can be something as simple as the phone number, there's one digit off, right? And so they're trying to call and the number's not working, right? Or there was a mistake with the email address and they're trying to send an email and it's not going through and it just closes, right? Because they can't get in touch with the young person. So things like that. So keeping track, if you've not heard back from them in a couple of weeks after submitting the referral, you can reach back out, right? And say, hey, I submitted this referral on this date and I've not heard from anybody. I want to make sure that it's going through, right? And see if there's anything you need to do. And then the last thing with kind of this initial process is if you've gotten set up, right? Or if you've gotten a young person set up and you are still in school, your DRS counselor should be coming to your IEP meeting, right? They are another member of your IEP team and they can be there and they should be there to help kind of understand what's going on at school, right? What services you might be getting through school, what needs school has identified, and figure out from there, right, what DRS can provide and how the whole team can work together to make sure that you're prepared for entering the workforce and for being independent as an adult. Some other things to think about as you're going through this process and some tips are talking with the school team about what services may be appropriate. So if your child or if you as an individual have an IEP in school or a 504 plan, those outline a lot of what your needs are, right? And what services and supports might be helpful for you in school. And a lot of times those things translate into what you might need in the workplace, right? So having those conversations with your school team, your teachers, your counselors, any other providers that you're working with, like occupational therapists or social worker, right? They might be able to help you kind of figure out what services and supports you could need. Because sometimes it can be really hard to figure out where to start, right? Especially if you've not had a job before. It's hard to know what supports and services you may need to be successful in the workplace. Another tip is to think about both your long-term and your short-term employment goals and which could DRS help you with now. So this seems to come up a lot for me when I have students who may already have a part-time job, right? A job that they're really proud of and doing really great at. But ultimately, their goal for their career, right, is something more long-term and it's something that they need help with, right? So for example, if you've got, if a young person has a part-time job but really wants to go to college, right, to become a nurse, right? So if that's the case, then maybe DRS can help right now with tuition for college for that student to explore that long-term employment goal, right? And pursue their long-term goal. And they don't need supports with that part-time employment right now, right? Or it can be the other way around, right? Maybe a student has a long-term career goal that they know of and they want to pursue, but they're not ready to start doing that yet. Instead, right now, they need help with getting a job immediately, right? And that's okay, right? And it's just making sure that the IPE, that individualized plan for employment that Megan and Sarah have talked about, right, that it reflects what the current goal is, right? What is that student want help with right now? And then that can always be changed and adjusted in the future. If that goal changes or if we're ready to switch from the part-time job goal to the long-term career goal, right, we can make that change. Another piece is if you're really not sure what services and supports or what you want to do, right, or what the young person you're with wants to do, you can request a vocational evaluation from DRS. Right? And those evaluations really look at an individual in different types of employment settings to see how they do, right? Where are their skills? Where are their strengths? Where might they need a little bit more work or more help? What are they interested in, right? To really kind of figure out where we're going to start and what services might be important for that person to figure out employment. And then the last thing is just to make sure it's clear what DRS is responsible for, what they're going to provide, right? We've talked about that needs to be clear in the IPE. This gets a little complicated when we're talking about youth that are still in school. So if it says in the student's IEP, right, their individualized educational program through school, right, what school is going to provide and what DRS is going to provide. We want to make sure that that's clear on the IPE. Nice and confusing with all of our acronyms here. But you want to make sure it's clear on both of those documents who is doing what, and that you, right, as a student or as a parent working with your student to access these services, that you know what's going on too. So you know who to call when things aren't happening, right? Or when you have concerns about the services that are being provided. And then one more thing, if you request a service and they say no, one tip is just ask them why, right? And especially if you think you're going to reach out to us, right? You know, that's going to be our first question is, did they tell you why? Because it's helpful to know, right? Is it that we need more documentation, right? Is it there's just some confusion on what you're asking for, or is it a bigger issue that we need to escalate? So always just a good tip there. And then I wanted to lastly just talk a little bit about special education concerns. So if you have a student who is accessing DRS services, but they also are in school, right, and they're supposed to be getting transition services through school, you might be running into issues with accessing those services. So if you have concerns about services at school, as we mentioned earlier, I'm part of our special education clinic here at Equip for Equality, and one of the things we do is help with that, right? So you're always welcome to contact us if you have questions about your child's rights in school, or kind of what you can do and you're thinking you need help from somebody. But some things that you could do is you can request an IEP meeting to discuss your concerns with the IEP team, right? You can request an IEP meeting for your child at any time to have those conversations. And if you're a young person who has your own educational decision-making rights, because you're over 18, you can request an IEP meeting at any time, right? You don't need a parent to do that for you at that point. You can also request an independent educational evaluation, or an IEE, right? So if you feel like the evaluations that the school has done are not sufficient, right, and not giving you the information that you need, then you can request that they pay for somebody else to do an evaluation, an independent evaluation. And there's some things involved with all of this. All of these options, we have lots of fact sheets on our website, and we're happy to send more information if you have questions or are thinking about exploring any of these options. You also have the right to request mediation. It's a free and voluntary process to try and reach a resolution with the school district. And then you can request a due process hearing before an impartial hearing officer. This is like a small trial, so it's a pretty big undertaking. So again, if you're thinking about this, we recommend you reach out to us and we can talk you through some of the details of it and what options might be the best for you. And then finally, you still have the right to file a state complaint against with the Illinois State Board of Education about those issues as well. So some common questions or issues that we see for youth in transition, right, is parental involvement, right? So the first thing is, yes, parents, you can continue to be involved. This gets a little tricky, right? And students reach the age of majority in Illinois at 18, and now they have the right to make all of their own life decisions. But that doesn't mean that the parent has to be completely cut out, right? If the young person wants their parent to be involved, they can be involved, right? They just need your permission, or you just need their permission as their parent, right, to be involved on those calls. You may need to sign a release, get them to sign a release for you to get information from the school or from DRS without them being present, right? So you don't need a release if the student is with you, but you will if you're looking for information and the student is not with you. With STEP and Fast Track, we mentioned it earlier, but I just wanted to highlight it again. You can participate without having a case open. So you don't have to have gone through that application process and eligibility process that Sarah went through earlier, or to participate in STEP and Fast Track. And then college tuition and dual enrollment. So I know we talked about it as one of the services that DRS provides is that they can pay for college tuition. This also includes tuition for dual enrollment classes, as long as the school district is not paying for them. So the school district is not responsible for paying for dual enrollment, and those are classes that your child may be taking at a community college or a university while they're still in school, right? So while they're still receiving special education services from the school district. And so the district is not responsible for it if it's going through that for that post-secondary degree, okay? But DRS may be able to pay for it if it goes towards their employment goal. So it's an important thing to think about. And then another piece is the case transfer. So if your child has a DRS case open and they're working with a counselor through high school, there's a good chance that their case is then going to be transferred to an adult counselor when they graduate high school or when they graduate and leave to the transition program that they are in. They'll get moved over. So you just want to make sure that if that is happening, right, that all of that information gets transferred over in a timely manner and that you know who to talk to, right? Who is that case gotten transferred to, and who do you need to get in touch with? This is really important, especially if you've got youth that are trying to go to college, right? And that transition is happening at the end of the school year and then they're starting college in the fall. It's a pretty quick turnaround. And we want to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks with making sure that everything is set up for that youth going into college. And then the case closure piece is just, I know we've talked about it a good bit here, and just if your case is closed, right? If a case is closed, you can always reopen it, right? Or open a new case with DRS. This happens a lot with maybe your young person wants to have a DRS case open immediately, and then they decide that they don't really want services right now. That's okay, right? It doesn't mean that they're just done. It means that they can come back to it later and open a new case with DRS and get services at a later date. And we talked a lot about please contact us and all of the many things that you should. Here is our contact information. You can reach us by phone at 855-452-2725, right? You can also send us an email at cap@equipforequality.org. And then our website with lots of information on it with fact sheets and recordings. This recording will be on that website, as well as all the materials from today's presentation, is www.equipforequality.org/cap. And Rachel actually just put all of that information in the chat, so you can access it there as well. And then we wanted to just highlight one other program at Equip for Equality called New Leaf Illinois. And so this is a project that's funded by the Illinois Equal Justice Foundation, and it's for clearing cannabis convictions. So it's a statewide, state-funded initiative to provide free legal help to people impacted by cannabis arrests and convictions. So if you may be eligible, or if you know someone else is eligible or think they might be, they can contact New Leaf Illinois today to complete a 1-minute registration and find out if they're eligible or if you're eligible to clear your cannabis record. And that information is newleafillinois.org. And the phone number is here as well.
Great, thanks, Emily, and thanks, Sarah. This is Megan once again. I think we have saved a couple of minutes for some questions. I will stop sharing my screen so that I'm able to see the chat. So I can read out the questions. Just a second. So I'm seeing one question in the Q&A box, and we'll also look in the chat as well. So this question asks, if the client has another employment plan, can they submit or use that also? For example, they might have an individual reemployment plan, or IRP, from Title III Wagner Kaiser Employment Service. Sarah or Emily, do you want to answer that one?
I believe that theoretically they could. I mean, I think DRS would still need their own employment plan updated in their record, but you likely need to go over it with your counselor to make sure that whatever services are in that original plan are something that DRS can provide, you know, those sorts of things. So it's not something where I don't think you can immediately substitute it, but if somebody brought a copy of a plan like that, you know, you do have a right to informed choice regarding the DRS process and your DRS services. So, you know, if you would like to kind of have your IPE drafting process involve going over that plan with your counselor and ideally getting a similar plan put in place with DRS, that should be an option. That should be something that your counselor is willing to collaborate with you on.
Okay, great, thank you. Sarah. And I just wanted to be mindful, we are approaching the 1 o'clock hour, and we unfortunately only have our interpreters through 1 o'clock. But I believe that we will be trying to answer the questions that you have. If you're not able to have them answered live, you can feel free to reach out to the Client Assistance Program directly, or reach out to Sarah, Emily, or myself if you have specific questions. We're sorry that we weren't able to answer all of them now. The one thing I will say is someone asked in the chat about getting a certificate for attendance. That's something that we unfortunately don't know about or control, but I would encourage you to follow up with whomever you obtained your certification and licensure with to ask if they would consider granting this course towards that credit. And again, a copy of the presentation will be available, and we will send out the PowerPoint slides. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. And thank you so much to our interpreters and captioner for providing access. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day and a nice weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.